Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how do you make big profits on small flips. So let's get into it. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about small flips and big profits. So, why are we talking about this particular topic? The reason why we're talking about this topic is because I know probably when you heard the title, it got you. Well, what do you mean small flips and you make big profits? Yes, I said that correctly, is do small flips if you want to make an extraordinarily large profit. I know what the typical wisdom is and what you would think that, Andrew, don't I have to do a 800, 900,000, $1 million flip or a over the top rehab to really make a good amount of money? Absolutely not. And I'm going to show you in this particular podcast exactly what the thought process is and what do I mean by big flips. What am I talking about by big profit numbers? This is not about flipping big properties. This is about creating an extraordinary amount of profit in a small amount of time, in a short amount of time. So the reason why I chose this topic is because when you watch a HGTV show today, or if you watch YouTube, you watch any of those types of things, guess what they talk about? Oh my God, look at my flip. I did this extraordinary amount of work and I made this huge amount of profit. And a lot of times they're talking about flipping 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, $100,000 properties, doing 80, 90, 100, $200,000 work to show, oh my God, I made $80,000 or $100,000 on this particular property. Guys, it's not about the total amount of money that you make. It's about the amount of money that you make versus the amount of time and the money you have invested. So this is important for you to understand. If you truly want to be a business person, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be truly successful, understand the difference between, so I could say to you, hey, this year, I made $1 million. Well, did I make $1 million in gross revenue? Was that $1 million in profit? And if I said, oh my God, I made $1 million in profit, you may think that that is an extraordinary amount of money. But if I'm running a $30 million business to make $1 million in profit, that's a very small amount of money in proportion. So what we have to think about whenever we think about profits, when we think about flips, is how much money did I put up, how much effort did it require, and how much return did I make? So as we get started, a lot of times this myth about big projects and big money, it absolutely has nothing to do with each other. So I kind of wrote down a few notes. So I'm going to go through it as we get through it. So what is the amount of money that you should be making on a property that you're flipping? So let's first establish the amount of time, because the timeline is important. So if it takes you 6 months to make a profit, if it takes you a year to make a profit, or if it takes you 2 years to make a profit, that's going to be a little bit different. So when we're flipping a property, traditional property, which you buy, rehab, and resell for a profit, we always look at a 6-month timeline. Now, can it take 7 months? Can it take 8 months? Absolutely. But the timeline that we follow is 6-month timeline is what we follow. That in 6 months, can you get the property turned? Now, if it takes a little bit more, that's okay. But when we're calculating our profits, we're basing it on a 6-month return. So what's a good return? According to me, this is the formula you should follow. In 6 months, whatever the ARV of the property is, I want to make 20% on that ARV. So what is ARV? ARV is your after repair value. So if you're selling a property for $4,000, in that case, you're going to take $4,000 times 20% of that number, so that gives you $80,000. So here's the first part of the formula, and that is 20% of the ARV needs to be done in 6 months, or the rehab amount and greater of the two. So now let's put it all together. In 6 months on a $400,000 property, if I make 20%, which is $80,000, that's the first part of it, I'm happy. But the second thing I'm going to look at is how much money did I put in rehab? So let's say I spent $60,000 rehabbing that particular property, then I'm pretty happy to make $80,000 in 6 months. But what if I spent $100,000 to rehab the property and then I only made 80? At that point, I don't consider that as a home run flip. I don't consider that as a big profit flip. Why? Because I had to do a lot more rehab. Is that pretty good? Yes, it's a good amount of return on your money invested or even on the money you may have borrowed. But what we ideally want is we want 20% of the ARV in 6 months compared to or the rehab amount, whichever one is greater. So that's the formula 20% of the ARV or the rehab amount, whichever one is greater. So it's important to understand when we talk about big profits. So somebody flips a property for $1 million and they make $150,000. Is that a good profit? And it takes them generally $1 million property. Generally, it's going to take you a little bit longer. So let's say it takes them a year to flip that property. And all that you made is $150,000 on $1 million flip. Absolutely not. I would not be happy. In fact, I would be pissed that that is not enough of a margin. Now, I understand, depending on the type of market you live in, depending on where you live, you may say, Andrew, but that is not realistic in my market. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about on today's podcast. So, first thing let's look at is what really makes money in a property. I know a lot of times people think, oh my God, I did a new plumbing system, I need new electrical, I did new sewers, I did a new roof, I did new windows, I did new siding. All of those things is what really counts, guys. All of those things. It's like when you buy a car, you expect it to be working. When you buy a car, you expect it to have brakes. When you buy a car from a dealership, even if it's a used car, you want to have tires that are safe to drive down the highway, right? So those are things that are expected. You buy a car, the door is expected to close. You buy a car, the lights are supposed to work. Those are safety issues that they're not going to sell you a car without those being operational because those are safety issues, right? So same exact thing with a house. If you have a roof that is 8 years old on the house, or you have a roof that is pretty much brand new, on a resale home. What do I mean resale? Meaning a used house, right? People are buying a home like most houses that are sold. They're not new construction. They're not brand new properties. They're all resale, meaning it's being sold for a second, third, fourth, fifth, 100th time. And either if you fixed up the property, great. People will pay if you have done a nice job rehabbing a property. They may pay a little bit of a premium because you've done a nice job on those things. But just because you did all new sewers, nobody's going to pay you an extra $15,000 just because you did all new HVAC because you had to do it because the old system was that old. Nobody's going to pay you for that. They're paying you for the entirety of the house. So what we have to understand is what are the things in a home that actually make money? There are only 3 things in a home that actually make money. Now, some may argue, and so let me give you what that is. It's KBB. What is that? Kitchen, bedroom, bath. That's all it is. There are 3 things in a house that make money. It's kitchen, bedroom, and bath. Now, people may say, but what, Andrew, what if I have a house and it overlooks the ocean? Right? It's just a beautiful location that's overlooking a great vista, whatever the location is. Well, then people will pay for that premium for that location. But then every house which is going to be in that area, right? So if I'm on, say, the 2nd floor versus I'm on the 80th floor of a building, generally the 80th floor of a building for a similar size unit is going to sell more for more. Why? Because you're paying for the premium. But guess what? 99.9% of the houses in America, that's not what it is, right? You're neither on the ocean, you're neither right in the middle of a forest preserve, and you're neither on the 80th floor. So for 99.9% of the homes in America, what people pay for is one thing and one thing only. Actually, 3 things, I should say, is KBB, kitchen, bedroom, and bath. So whenever you're flipping a house, whenever you're rehabbing a property, the focus should always be, can I redo the kitchen? Can I add a bathroom? And generally, so think about a bathroom up. Don't think about a bathroom down. Meaning generally, in most places, if you add a bathroom on the main level or the 2nd level, it has more value than if you add a bathroom in a basement, if and when possible. This is something understandable. So now in a place like, let's say, Chicago market, where we happen to have a lot of older properties, right? So if I'm adding a bath on the main floor, if I'm adding a bath on the second floor, it's going to have a lot more value than if I'm adding a bath in a basement. Not that you can't do that. Now, in places like Arizona, places like Texas, places like Florida, there are no basements, so that's out of the question. But in a lot of the parts of the country where you have basements, you have to think about, where am I strategically going to add a bath? People today attach a lot of value with a bathroom for whatever reason, and they consider that as an extra amenity. What about a bedroom? That's the third one. So it was kitchen, bedroom, and bath. So if I do a additional bedroom, so if I go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom house, that adds a lot of value to a property. But me just blowing out the back of the house, adding additional square footage, necessarily adding a bedroom to it, in most markets, the cost of doing all of those things, meaning adding square footage, adding extra, blowing out the whole attic, putting a second story, the cash on cash return in that particular case is never really worth it, right? Now, is it possible that, so I'll give you guys an example. In one of the suburbs of Chicago, I happen to have a property which I bought for about $200,000. Right across the street, a gentleman bought the same exact property for $250,000. So he ended up going and doing a second story addition. The second story addition, on top of what he bought the property for, cost him about another $200,000 in terms of putting the second story addition on, doing all the engineering, doing all the structural, and getting everything said and done. Now, his property, when it was all said and done, so think about it, 250 purchase plus 200,000 rehab on the back end. So he's in that particular property for 450. That's hard cost. Doesn't include financing, doesn't include any other costs. He's in that deal for 450 hard cost. When he sold that property, he sold the property for $600,000. So he's like, Andrew, look at my property. My property sold for $100,000 more than your property. I'm like, you're 100% right that your property sold for $100,000 more. But here's the difference. Did you make more profit on your property? I bought my property for $200,000. I rehabbed it for $70,000. So my all-in cost at that point is $270,000. Even with carrying cost, meaning finance cost, other costs, my total cost in that property is $305,000. I sold that property for $465,000. So if I'm selling a property for $465,000, my all-in cost, including rehab cost, is $305,000. I made a profit of about $150,000 net profit. But he sold his property for $600,000, and when you look at $450,000 all in, plus his other carrying cost, plus the cost of selling, which is almost $60,000, all of those things put together, he actually only made $70,000 on his particular property. So doing the extra amount of work doesn't necessarily get you the extra amount of returns. So let's look at his property versus my property. What were the market differences? Same market, A area, meaning an aspirational, affluent area. And because he overdid the work in his property. So in that particular house, what are the things that make money? See, the things that make money are kitchen, bedroom, bath. Now, did I have to upgrade the electrical? Yes. Did I have to upgrade the plumbing service? Yes. I had no choice. That was required by the particular town, so I had no choice but to upgrade those things. But the things that made money was kitchen. So first of all, when you're upgrading a kitchen, if you put in expensive cabinets, does that get you a return on your money? Absolutely not. If you go literally with something like a big box store cabinets, meaning white cabinets from Home Depot, those are good enough actually, even in a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 house, because most people, 99.9% of the American public does not know the difference between cabinets that you can get for $2,800, $2,900, $3,000 versus cabinets that you'll spend $6,000 or $7,000 on. Literally, or even $10,000 on. 99% of people will not know the difference. And they won't care once everything is put together. So in terms of the kitchen, I put in pretty basic cabinets, basic quartz countertops. The only thing that we did do in the kitchen today, what do people like? People like an open concept. So the wall between the kitchen and the living room, we did open it. And since we were doing new plumbing, new electrical, we did reposition the kitchen to sit in a way that it gave an open feel. See, if you take out one wall and you do the kitchen, you increase the value of a property on an average from anywhere from $35,000 to $65,000, depending on the location. And a lot of times people think you have to spend a lot of money into a kitchen. Guys, on an average property, you do not have to spend any more than $8,000 to $10,000, maybe tops, $15,000 in an average kitchen. We're not talking about big properties. We're not talking about properties that are massive. The average property across America is not a property that is 3,000, 4,000 square foot. The average property that is being flipped, and that should be flipped where you can maximize your returns, are anywhere from 900 square feet to about 1,800 square feet. These are not big houses. These are your run-of-the-mill properties that are ranches, that may be a split level, that may be a bi-level, that may be a two-story, that may be a property which is just a blah property. Generally, as the square footage of the property goes up, your margin per square foot is going to come down. That is just how it is. That generally, if you add any more than 4 bedrooms to a property, if you have a 2-bedroom, you take it to a 3-bedroom, immense value, because most families want a minimum of a 3-bedroom. If you have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and you can make it a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, that has immense value for a client buying it. But if you go from a 3-bedroom and it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bath to a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, you're not necessarily going to get that much more value. Neither are you going to get that much more appraisal in most cases, and nor is the customer, the person who is buying your property, they're not going to pay an equivalent amount. So when we think about flipping, think about this. Think about you bought an ugly house and you made it pretty. The goal is not to make an ugly house into a Taj Mahal. The ugly house needs to be turned into a pretty house. And think about it from, I'm going to do 90% of the rehab. I'm not going to do 100% rehab. So what do I mean? So if it is good enough, it is good enough. Meaning, if a roof is good enough to pass inspections, it is good enough. There's no reason to change it. Because if I put on a $10,000 roof, guess what's going to happen? I'm not going to get $10,000 back in value. And I'm not going to do any rehab to a property unless, if I'm going to do a $10,000 rehab on the roof, I need to get 12, 14, 15,000 in terms of return back on the particular property. Otherwise, I am not going to do that type of work. Now, sewers, electrical, plumbing, those are things you're going to have to do in a property. So you always have to think about, if you're going to flip properties, think about boring, ugly properties to flip. Nothing exciting. Generally, in our market, so we operate out of the Chicago market and we operate in the Florida market. So general suburbs market of Chicago. What is it? Chicago is an older town and it is a boring place. Now, I know if you've been to downtown Chicago, you may think downtown Chicago is very exciting. True. But most parts of America are like the suburbs of Chicago. They're kind of boring. They're kind of blah. So unless you're flipping a condo in downtown Miami, now there you may be, I shouldn't say downtown Miami, I should say close to the water in Miami. Or if you're in a very exciting location, which is not 99% of the flips aren't in those locations. 99% of people in America live in boring places. Even though you may live in Miami, the possibility is you're probably not living right on the water. And you're certainly not doing flips generally right on the water. Because guess what? They're going to be very, very expensive, and it's going to be hard to find those properties at a deep, deep, deep discount. Why? Because somebody's going to look at it and they're going to go ahead and pay for that premium location. You're not going to get that property at 30 or 40 cents on the dollar. Typically, that is going to be extremely, extremely rare. So when we think about flipping, doing small flips for bigger properties, always look at boring type of properties in boring neighborhoods, and generally properties that are anywhere from 800 square feet to 1,800 square foot or so. Now, there are going to be some exceptions, of course. Do we do some flips that are larger, that are 2,500, 3,000? Yes. But the number of flips that we do that are on the smaller side is going to be more like 80, 90%, 95% of all the flips that we do that are the most profitable are always smaller properties. And we never try to do any second story conversions. We never try to do any sort of a square footage additions. I know a lot of people are fascinated by putting on second stories, by doing a lot of square footage conversions. But guys, you do not get dollar per dollar. If you're going to do flips and you're going to do flips in 6 months, they're much more profitable than building a new house. You're going to make more return on doing one small flip. As far as we're talking about time, money, and effort. Time, money, and effort, you're going to make much more. It's going to be, see, boring things are much more profitable. Sexy things like building a house. Yes, it's exciting. Say, oh yeah, I'm a builder now. I'm not just doing a small flip, or I'm not doing just 10 small flips. I'm a builder. It makes you feel important. It makes you feel sexy. Anybody you tell your friends to, oh my God, yeah, my friend is a builder developer. Guys, just because you call yourself a builder developer or that's what you choose to do, the margins on building developing are not as lucrative as they are on smaller flips that you can do. And remember the rule. It's kitchen, bedrooms, and baths. That's where you're going to make dollar per dollar the most amount of return on a property. So we talked about a kitchen. Opening up a kitchen, putting in a brand new kitchen, that's going to give you a bump in the price of 35 to 55, 65,000, depending on where you are. So if you're doing a $10,000, $15,000 kitchen, you need to make, right, 3 to 4 times money value back on that particular kitchen. If I'm going to put a new bath in, I'm going to spend, say, $7,000, $8,000 putting a new bath in. Well, I need to get a perceived value back of 35, 40,000 in value from the person that is going to buy the house. Same thing with a bedroom. If I'm going to do a bedroom, I'm always going to try to do a bedroom on the main level, or I'm going to try to do a bedroom upstairs in the attic, or if that space is available. Because the value that you create by adding a bedroom in the basement is always going to be much, 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 much less compared to the value that's going to be in your main living spaces, either on the main floor or on the second floor. So having said that, where do you really make money in a property? You make money in a property when you buy the property right. And this is what most people don't understand. Most people think, well, I sold the property and I made a profit. No. Selling is just collecting your profits, right? That's all that it is collecting your profits. That's it. But really, the place where you make money on a property is when you buy the property right inherently in the first place. That's where you're truly making money, that you bought the property at a deep discount. Now, rehabbing the property, all you're doing when you're rehabbing a property is really building. So if I do a $30,000, $40,000 rehab, I better increase the value of that particular building by about $100,000, right? If I'm not doing that, then why am I doing the rehab in the first place, right? I'm not going to do an $80,000 rehab only to make a $20,000, $30,000 profit. That absolutely makes no sense. So if I'm going to buy a property, if I'm going to put $60,000, $70,000 in rehab, I need to make about $70,000 to $80,000 in return on that particular property. So flipping is all about buying a property, rehabbing it, getting it sold in a reasonable amount of time. Reasonable amount of time to me is 6 months. So if it takes me 7 months, 8 months to do one of our projects, guess what? I am not happy. Doesn't mean I didn't make money. So I'll give you guys an example. Last year, I purchased a property for about $250,000. Then I rehabbed the property on top of it, spent about $75,000, $80,000 doing that. When I sold that particular property, even though it's in a good area, when you really look at my profit, I barely made about $49,000 on that property. Now, people will say, what, barely made $49,000, Andrew? I would be ecstatic if I made $49,000 on a flip. But guys, guess what? By the time I purchased the property, Then I rehab the property. We spent almost 65, 70 in rehabbing the property. Then the property contract fell through a couple of times, nothing I could do about it. And then we finally go and sell the property in the end. Guess what? If I'm only making $49,000 in that property for the amount of time, money, effort that I spent, that profit in relation to that is absolutely not worth it. I should have put that property just right back on the market and just sold it, and I still would have made 30,000 bucks. Rehabbing a property has everything to do with making sure you bought the right property, you bought the right location. So if you're going to be a successful flipper, here's some basic things to think about. Number one, look at in your area, what are the areas that have the most amount of sales? Meaning, what are the areas that have a high amount of absorption rate, and they need to be B and C areas. Don't go into an A area. So of course, in every city, everybody knows the most expensive area of town that everybody wants. Guess what? It's going to be picked through. It's going to be too difficult for you to go find a property there. And generally, it's going to be ultra expensive around the country. So you're always looking for B areas, B meaning a little bit less than the most expensive areas, or C areas, meaning areas that have more challenges than even the B areas. Why? Because those areas are going to be areas that are going to be bread and butter and some challenges in that area, and you're going to find the most volume, right? I didn't say the hottest, I said the most volume of transactions will generally happen in those areas. Number two, it needs to be within a 30 to 40 minute driving distance of your house, of your apartment, of your condo, wherever you live. Why? Because if you're going to do flips and you're going to do them at speed and you want to make them highly profitable, you need to be able to go follow up on properties. Now, today, for me in my business, I never go to the properties that I buy because I have somebody on staff that's their sole job. They go, they follow up, they make sure, but then do I have to make sure that things are moving forward, that I'm progressing? Yeah, that's called money management. It's at the end of the day, it's my butt on the line. So we're going to manage all our projects, but I'm necessarily not going and looking at these properties to what's happening, but it's based on, so if I have to make a trip there for whatever reason today, right? Now I count it in the number of trips I had to make on a property. The perfect property for me is that I have never seen. And I know for a lot of people, it's like, well, how can you flip a property you've never seen? Well, if one of your staff members has seen it, guess what? Then I've seen the property, right? As far as I'm concerned. So if I have to actually go there, then that means that I'm having to put my own efforts in. Now, for years, of course, I didn't just get here. I had to go do all of that work to go look at the property, see the property, make sure, cross every I, dot every T, because that is what is required when you're getting started. So number one is you got to identify an area where you have a lot of absorption, B and C area. The next thing you have to look at is what is the price range that moves the best? Meaning, let's say in a particular property, so I'll talk about, the other day I was talking to somebody that's in our mastery class, and I was talking about Houston. And so we were looking for this particular area of Houston, which is Katy, Texas. So just a suburb that's west of Houston, and he found a property over there for 162,000 bucks. And he's like, Andrew, what do you think about the property? I'm like, well, how many bedrooms? How many baths? What are the taxes? What is the square footage of the property? And what can you do to really sell it at a huge profit? I'm like, well, is that an area that sells a lot? He's like, yeah, man, that average price range in that area, the sweet spot in that area is 350 to 400. What is the average type of property that sells in that area? Well, it's 3 bedrooms. I know it's 1.5 to 2 bedrooms. Excuse me, 1.5 to 2 baths. That's property completely redone. Oh my God, it'll fly off the shelf. I'm like, 100%. See, he picked the area, he picked a sweet spot there, and now he's finding properties that are blah, meaning there's not a whole lot to do in the property except it's an inside rehab, outside cleanup, and that's it. So that's the other thing you have to remember. One is you have to think about what area. Then you have to think about, okay, is this a sweet spot? Meaning the price range that I'm buying it in and the price range that I'm going to sell in. That's the most important. Is that a price range that moves a lot? Is there a lot of activity in that price range? If there's a lot of activity in that price range, guess what? Then I am good to go. So that's a price range that I can work within, and that is an area that I want to flip. The other thing you have to think about is, okay, how much rehab am I going to have to do? right? So the way we divide it is this a 25? Is this a 45? Or is this an 80? So what do I mean by that? If you touch a house, it's 25. If you have to do a good amount of work, meaning all new mechanicals, pretty much redo all the inside, it's 45,000. Now, there's a caveat to that. The average property needs to be somewhere from 900 to about 1,200 square feet. So if it's any more than that, you're going to have to adjust for it. So 2025 is just touching the property. 45, you can do a good bit of work. New bathrooms, new kitchen, all new floors, all new appliances, all of that kind of stuff for 45,000. Or is it an $80,000 rehab? Now, 80,000 means you're on the bigger end of the spectrum. You have to do some outside work. You have to do some inside work. You really are doing extensive amount of work. Any property generally for 99.9% of you, if you're going to have to do more than 75, 80,000 work, and you're not going to make at least $75,000, $80,000, it's just not worth it. It is just not worth it. Wholesale it, do something else, but do not get into those flips, because over the long term, when you look at it, flipping is all about speed. Flipping is all about if you bought the property right. It is not about trying to do a lot of work to make a profit. That's called just plain working hard. Go get some other job, because that's going to be a lot easier than just flipping a property. Flipping, buy the property right, rehab it right on time, on budget, and get it sold for the right amount of profit. You have to look at small flips to really make big profits. And when you think about profits, remember the formula. 20% of the ARV is what you want to make ideally in less than 6 months. And the second part of the formula is you're going to look at the amount of rehab, and you're going to look at the greater of the two. Having said that, this is Andrew. Hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any other guests that you think would be of great value, please always let us know. Make sure you share, you like, and this is Andrew from Cashflow for Life. Have a good day.